This is Bandit, the Atari 8-bit podcast.
Sometime later, I got a message on my telephone answering machine, and it was from Chris. It was very short. It said, "Stop working on the article," and I can't tell you why.
This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Ted Farmer created one product for the Atari 8-bit computers with an unwieldy name. It was called Eastern Front 1941 Scenarios for 1942, 1943, 1944. The disc of add-on scenarios for Eastern Front 1941 first appeared in the fall 1983 APX catalog, alongside Chris Crawford's Eastern Front 1941 Scenario Editor, the program that Ted used to create the scenarios. I'll read its entry in the APX catalog. Eastern Front Scenarios 1942, 1943, 1944 by Ted Farmer. Recommended for teenagers and up, written in machine language. 3 challenging new scenarios to add to Eastern Front 1941. Deep in Russia, with the temperatures falling and the Russian defenses stiffening, your men are hungry, tired, and ill-equipped. Good luck. Operation Barbarossa has begun, an unexpected second year. With finely detailed historical accuracy, Ted Farmer has recreated the 3 years of the Eastern Front campaign following the German blitzkriegs of the summer of 1941. Armchair generals can now see these early successes eclipsed by the devastating Russian counteroffenses. The 1942 scenario centers around the battle for Stalingrad. In 1943, the enormous tank battle of the Kursk operation takes the center stage. In late 1943 and 1944, the scenarios deal with the German retreat before the massive Russian counteroffenses. The odds against success are almost insurmountable, but for the strategic wargamer, these scenarios present the realistic challenge of Barbarossa in the years of its decline. If you're smart and very lucky, you may continue a campaign in which survival is a form of victory. Each new scenario requires very different strategies to play well. The author invites written comments and questions. Review comments. Designed with Chris Crawford's new Eastern Front 1941 Scenario Editor, APX 20233, these new scenarios are all written at the expert level and can be an excellent addition to your Eastern Front library. Can only be used with the Atari Eastern Front cartridge, cannot be used with the original APX version. Requires Atari Eastern Front 1941 cartridge, 1 Atari joystick controller. Optional, Eastern Front 1941 Scenario Editor, APX 20233. Order information. It was available on cassette and diskette. Either way, it required 16K of RAM. It cost $17.95. It was catalog number 20232. This interview took place on January 27th, 2018.
So I was thinking that the lead-up would be my interest in 4 different things. My interest in games, my interest in history, my interest in Russia, the Russian language and its history, and the 4th is my interest in computers. So
Okay.
let me... was born in 1948 in Central Texas, and I have early memories of our family, our extended family, playing board games on holidays. I was sort of half nerd, half geek, and fortunately gifted academically. I decided to teach myself chess in 4th grade. Had a paperback book called Chess Made Simple. I read it, and then come home from elementary school and play with the kid down the street until parents got home. Later on, my interest in games expanded. I saw in the newspaper there was this bridge column, and in 11th grade I taught myself how to play contract bridge, which then continued after I went on to college, playing duplicate bridge. And my last note about interest in games was that while I was in college, I was introduced to the Avalon Hill board game called Stalingrad. And that essentially was a board version of Chris Crawford's Eastern Front.
Cool.
Yeah, my interest in history was my parents were both born in 1920. They grew up during the Depression, and when we would have family gatherings, then uncles and aunts, sitting around, would talk about the Depression era. My mother's father was a dirt farmer in central Texas, and he actually helped Lyndon Johnson with his first congressional campaign for Congress in 1932. So I grew up in a family that was very politically aware and kind of populist Democrats. When I graduated from high school, I applied for and was offered a 4-year Army ROTC scholarship to Rice University in Houston. And there at Rice, there was a language requirement for 2 years in order to graduate. And I'd already had 3 years of Spanish. Didn't want to do German, didn't want to do French. But there was a small department for Russian. And so as a freshman and sophomore, I studied the Russian language. And then I'd started at Rice as a theoretical math major in the humanities side of instead of in the sciences side. And later I switched over to be a history major. And so one of the courses I took was a year-long course in Russian history. So those were some of my interest in background in history. Mm-hmm. So interest in computers. At Rice, I took a Fortran programming course. And after I graduated, got my commission as a second lieutenant, then I was trained in infantry, was at Fort Jackson, South Carolina as a basic combat training officer, and then my basic branch was personnel and administration. And because I owed the Army 4 years service for the 4-year scholarship, I looked around to see what else, could I volunteer for. My parents were both teachers, and so education was the way to get ahead. And I found a course that intrigued me and applied for it and was accepted in 1975. Then I spent 3 months in Indianapolis at the Army's newly minted automatic data processing officers course.
Cool.
There, I learned IBM assembler programming. I learned to program in COBOL, the Common Business Language, and also learned about systems analysis. My payback to the Army, the utilization assignment, I got to go to the Panama Canal Zone and be in charge of the operations of the Army's mainframe computer there in the Canal Zone. While I was there, I was still a bachelor, and there happened to be a Special Forces captain that was in the bachelor officers' quarters, and he and I would play Stalingrad from time to time, and each time we would switch sides. And that experience actually, I was able to use a little bit later, in 1979, and through and into 1980, I was able to attend the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. Mm-hmm. And for a year and a half, I pursued and obtained a Master of Science in Operations Research Systems Analysis. So essentially applied mathematics. And because it had a military flavor to it, there were several courses that introduced the students to modeling and simulation. And my master's degree thesis was entitled A Survey of Approaches to Modeling Land Combat. I did very well in the program, and the Army asked me to stay in Monterey with a small research detachment to help the Army in advancing modeling and simulation of land combat. While I was a student, I found, probably through a magazine advertisement, a microcomputer, a standalone microcomputer that would play chess. And I purchased that, and I remember having fun, leaving the apartment in the morning, give it my move, and then coming back, in the afternoon or evening, and walk in and go look at it and say, well, have you made up your mind yet? And I can remember, I think it took sometimes 2, 3, 4 days. And of course, I wrote down the moves, and so that was just continuing my interest in games. So while I was on the Army research assignment there in Monterey, just by the way, there was a professor who had a couple of contracts with the Army's Training and Doctrine Command, and through one of those projects, he was able to get an ID and password to be able to log on to a very basic research project that had just started, and he shared it with us, so I had early access to the initial ARPANET. Wow. That later became the DARPANET, that later evolved into the Internet. Sure. Yeah. So that gets me up to about 1982, which is when I met Chris Crawford. Before I go into Chris, do you have any questions about the background?
No, that was absolutely perfect, and that's great. So how did you meet Chris?
Okay, so as best I can remember it, and by the way, thank you so much for finding me. Once I got your letters and we made contact, it was a chance to dig back into my memory, some 35 years ago, and kind of relive that period in my life.
Excellent. Yes, I have that effect on people.
So, as best I can remember it, it was about 1982, and there was a software actually operating system company. I think it was called Digital Research, that was in Pacific Grove, California, adjacent to Monterey. And theirs was the CP/M operating system. Sure. And there was a convention up in San Francisco, and so I drove up and got there to the convention center. got the program and noticed that Chris Crawford was presenting a talk on game design. So I went to that presentation, and after he finished, then I told him about who I was, what I was doing, at the Naval Postgraduate School. We exchanged contact information, and I also mentioned to him that I loved his Eastern Front game, and I'd given some thought. I played it so much, I was giving some thought to writing an article about how to win, at Eastern Front. So I went back to Monterey, and told my coworkers about the experience. Not that. Sometime later, I got a message on my telephone answering machine, and it was from Chris. It was very short. It said, "Stop working on the article, and I can't tell you why."
That's intriguing.
So,
okay.
Yes. So I did, and later Chris invited me to come up to his office at Atari up in Silicon Valley. My memory thinks it was Cupertino, but I can't. I'm not sure that's accurate or not.
Probably Sunnyvale, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. So I drove up and met Chris, and we went, to his office. I met his coworkers, and so he started explaining why he had told me to stop. He had been redesigning the Eastern Front game to fit on a cartridge. Mm-hmm. And he told me that the scenario would be loaded from disk, and then when you wanted to save it, it would write it out to disk. Well, I immediately said, well, if it has that capability, then anyone could write a different scenario, same map, but a different scenario. And he said, "You're absolutely right. Would you be interested in writing some scenarios?" And I said, "Sure." So,
and you have all this experience modeling land combat.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
So I agreed that I would, develop historical scenarios, and he had already arranged. His plan, he had already arranged for permission for him to give to me one of the 3 Eastern Front cartridges that existed at that time. Mm-hmm. And so I took it. It was also, I believe, a program for being able to lay out, the scenarios. So he helped me along, with that.
The scenario editor was the name of the product, right?
Right. And so,
which I assume you're using a pre-release version because you're
exactly.
Okay, yeah.
Exactly. So as I was leaving, I actually swung by the startup office of Electronic Arts. Found out where they were, and swung by there. Can't remember if I went in and introduced myself, but the possibility of my leaving the Army and going and doing computer game design was kind of at the forefront of my thoughts at that time. Mm-hmm. So I said, while I'm up here, I'll swing by and see where Electronic Arts is. So I got back to Monterey, took some vacation time, read some military history books about the Great Patriotic War. That's the Russian name for World War II. Made notes and went through and picked out the 4 historical scenarios, designed them and tested them. And then from my notes wrote a narrative to go along with each of the 4 scenarios. And when that was finished, then I drove back up and delivered the material to Chris and the Atari store. And as best I can remember, I received 2 royalty checks, and I think they total maybe $30.
Wow!
For my effort, but that was fine. I had met Chris, and I had just a great time. Doing this project that brought all of these different interests together. Later, when Chris left Atari, he gave me a call and asked if I would come up and meet him, up at his new home just outside Silicon Valley, and so we could talk about his projects and game design. And I asked him if I could bring along 2 professors from the Naval Postgraduate School, and he said sure. So we made a trip up to his house and had fun meeting and interacting with Chris. And so we left there, and the 2 professors and I then started meeting semi-regularly to explore our different ideas about game design. That didn't progress very, very far. We were all pretty busy, and unfortunately, one of the professors was diagnosed with brain cancer and died in 1985, just before the Army reassigned me to Northern Virginia in the Pentagon. And I got married in August of '84, and that was the end of my free time.
Sure.
So that project on game design never bore any fruit.
What do you think it might have been in a different universe?
Well, we were interested somewhat in I don't know if I'm not sure what this would mean, but ethical gaming, something that was that would promote ethical behavior, and so we tried thinking about that without any real success, and finally we decided, let's just go be pirates. And so we just had the idea of doing that, and then it all just fell by the wayside. So,
but only the most ethical pirates.
Yes. And so from there, then the remainder of my time in the Army was in Northern Virginia, and I retired in '92 as a major, and worked as a Beltway bandit in supporting the military, and then was a Unix systems administrator in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and when the company was bought out, then I got a position at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, which I'm still here, pulling data out of databases and making official reports for the university.
Wow. You've been computing for a very long time. I mean, from mainframes to still doing it with big machines. That's awesome.
Yes.
So did you do any other projects on the Atari that maybe didn't turn into anything, or just dabbling on your own?
No, just mostly I was a consumer of the Atari. when I married, my wife liked to play games, and we had a daughter. My daughter's now 31, married. I've got 2 granddaughters. I can remember staying loyal to Atari. There was when I got to Northern Virginia, I found that there was a store. I believe it was either Bethesda or Rockville, Maryland, and I can remember driving there. There was one down probably Dale City. So I remember buying a Mega 4, and we had games on that. My daughter liked playing Monopoly, and with a Monopoly game that they had. And there was also a company that was over south of Annapolis, Maryland. I think it was Toad Computers. I met the fellow that owned that. So I kept my Atari equipment, maintained through them, and I was always loyal to the Atari. Didn't care that much for Apple.
The game was copyright by the Hexpert Company. I assume that was the name of your company. That's very, very clever, by the way. I like that.
It also reflected. I'd forgotten about that. While I was there in Monterey, I met a Polish fellow who had he represented a Polish prisoner of war who, in the Second World War, had been he was behind German lines as a kid, and he was a good chess player, and he developed a hexagonal a chess game based not on squares but on hexagons.
Okay.
And so when I met his representative, then I became interested in the possibility of licensing that game in the United States, and I pursued that for a while. I was still on active duty, but happened to find out that there would be really no copyright, or I think he had patented the game, and the patent had expired, and so there would be no copyright protection for me to be an exclusive, distributor of the game. Mm-hmm. So I was fortunate that we discovered that the patent, and hence the name of the company. That I'd already been pursuing that when the opportunity with Chris Crawford came up.
Cool.
Yeah.
So the original Eastern Front was, I believe, I don't want to say unwinnable, but it was designed to be very, very hard.
Yes.
And I'm curious, I have 2 questions. First of all, you said you were writing an article about how to win it. So what was the secret to that? And the second question is, on your scenarios, were they equally impossible?
Pretty much so. Especially since if I were top of my head, the Eastern Front is the initial invasion by the Germans, into Russia, and so the 4 scenarios were then based on later, primarily tank battles, and so. I remember the one that was the scenario around Kursk was the Soviets had just overwhelming tank superiority, and so the scenario was designed to reflect that. Mm-hmm. So after Stalingrad, then there was just nothing but retreat, strategic retreat by the German soldiers. And so those scenarios were designed to reflect the historical reality of it.
So was your game winnable?
I doubt it. But it had the narrative that went with it. So someone who, like most Americans, are unaware of how important, basically the Second World War, was won in Russia. The Americans had an important part in liberating Europe, but it was the Russians that paid the biggest cost, and depleted the German resources the most. So the idea was, I guess, educational, as much as education through the game scenarios.
Cool.
To bring the player into that world with somewhat other than a traditional American viewpoint.
Sure. So the original Eastern Front, what was your secret to beating it?
Well, actually, at this point, I don't really remember. I'm sure I had some ideas. Chris actually told me that there was a programming flaw in the original program, and that if essentially there were 4 directions, each piece had 4 facings. Mm-hmm. 3 of those facings worked. The 4th one, the view of the piece was essentially blind. Huh. And so someone had told him that they had essentially managed to flank and then attack the Russians from that blind flank and win. I never discovered that, but he shared that with me.
Very interesting. Cool.
Yeah.
I'm sure he took that bug out in the cartridge version anyway, so.
No doubt. Yeah, you can only test so much.
Yep, it's true. If you could send a message to the Atari computer users that still exist, and you can right now, what would you tell them? What would you tell them?
I would tell them to enjoy the architecture, enjoy the experience. If you can, see inside how difficult it was to program. By that I mean how much work it took the programmer, to do. Things are so much easier with now. and just appreciate the craftsmanship and the diligence of those early trailblazers, and give them a tip of your hat.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ted.
My pleasure. Thanks for finding me, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to tell my story.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute, there are 2 ways you can help. You can help fund these interviews directly by contributing to my Patreon. A small monthly contribution will help offset the expenses of making these oral history interviews. Contribute at patreon.com/Savitz. Or make a tax-deductible contribution to the Internet Archive, a nonprofit digital library that has done incredible things to preserve computer history. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate. Thanks.